The 100 episode 10, I Am Become Death. Now, this was yet another really good episode for this show, but what really caught my attention was that it felt really different from the other episodes. It had the same style to it. It was still what's going to happen, or who's going to live, who's going to die. And of course, I didn't expect any of the main people to die off. It was, as usual, the sort of the semi-important side characters, particularly Bellamy's people. They always seem to be the ones who end up getting killed off in the episodes. It's like we kind of know them, but not really. So it still sucks because they do actually have names and they do show up in pretty much every episode. And then it's like, well, now they're dead. So it's not a main character, but they're important enough for you to be like, oh, I don't remember their names, but I know they at least had them and they were said at least a dozen times in the show. And I remember their faces because they were shown so much, but then they get killed off. So it's semi-important, but they aren't main characters. But it was a good episode. And it was fairly subtle how in this one they had the same, like I said, it was the same style. They have this suspense with the grounders. What's going to happen? What are we going to do? We're infected with this virus. We don't know who's immune, who's going to die from it, who's going to resist long enough for themselves to get better or anything like that. And it was just really cool to see that where the infrastructure of the 100 was breaking down, not from the typical arguments, but from this person getting sick or this person being immune or this person being resistant for a really long time, and then they get sick at the last minute. So it was actually a different way for them to show the infrastructure of the group falling apart, especially in the scene where they thought everything was fine. They quarantined the people who were already sick, and then the people who were first sick, I guess the secondary group of people, the people they came in contact with, they started to show symptoms, and then everyone was kind of freaking out and pointing guns at other people and like, you have to go here and get away from me and stuff like that. And it was just a good scene. And also I love the part when Clark came out of the ship when she was giving a little speech and the guy was pointing the gun at her and Bellamy just took the gun and knocked him out, or at least he hit him in the nose and he fell. I thought that was a really funny scene because he just shut that guy up with no words. He just knocked the gun down and hit him in the face. I thought that was a funny scene, but it was really cool to see the infrastructure of the group struggle because of this virus and not simply because they were having their typical arguments. And in fact, one of the things I really noticed in this episode, which we've gotten, I think since everyone was kind of drugged by the old peanuts or whatever they were eating, Clark and Bellamy were fairly close in this episode. They've had a lot of similar ideas. Like, Clark has really changed a lot because she was the character who wouldn't fight or wouldn't kill people and stuff like that, and it seems like she's gone more down the route of doing things the way Bellamy would, or at least trusting Bellamy more than she did initially. So it was interesting to see them kind of band together, and then it seems like Finn is sort of the odd man out now because he's the only person who doesn't seem to want to take any physical actions against people, and Clark's kind of flipped her decision on that. So it's interesting to see Finn as the odd man out, and it feels like he's just off on his own because no one else seems to have the same thoughts as he does. And it was just really cool to have that dynamic in this episode again. And also, they did the whole love triangle thing. They kind of finished it up in this episode where Raven decides that she's not going to be with Finn because, and she did it, they did that in such a really, really good way where she talks about how he hesitated about the bomb thing. And it seems simple enough when he said that's what people do when they're about to make a decision that'll blow them up. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then she said you didn't hesitate when Clark fell over because the same thing could have happened. You didn't know if, considering how powerful the virus was, no one really knew how resistant they were to it. And it was just really interesting that she brought that up and she said you didn't hesitate then. And he easily could have died from that too, and it probably would have been a lot more painful. So when she said that, I thought that was just a really great way for her to make that decision. Like, he hesitated with this bomb, but he didn't hesitate with this girl because, of course, he loves her. So it was just really different. And I loved how she brought it up. I thought that was a great scene, too. And then as she kept going and she was talking about how she isn't loved the way she wants to be and Finn doesn't love her the way he loves Clark, I thought, it kind of brought it back into my mind that he's really just, it kind of makes me hate him a little because he's just like a cheater now. It's just like he's been Don Finn the cheater because it was a week and a half there on the ground, and then he slept with Clark, and then his girlfriend came down right after that, and it was just like, man, if he waited 2 weeks or just waited in general, I understand you never know what's gonna happen, but not that strong of a relationship when you just sleep with someone after a week and a half because they're attractive and they kind of have the same ideas you do. So in my head, it was just like, this is really all his fault. He's the one who caused all these problems because he couldn't just wait like a week and a half. If, I guess because he was in prison for a long time. I don't know, but they were together since they were kids. They grew up as friends and all that stuff. And then it was like prison, and then he meets the hot girl on Earth. I don't know, maybe that's what it was. But it really just came full force when she was talking about all that stuff, and was like, it kind of makes me not like him. He's a good guy in some aspects, but in that one specific aspect, he's not the greatest person because he wasn't really thinking straight or smart at all. And now he's kind of hurt the one person who was there in his life way more than anyone else, like more than anyone outside of his parents. It was Raven. So it'll be interesting to see how that carries on throughout this show because she was fairly distant. She didn't like bring it up every single chance she got, and there were a lot of chances because they always showed her face when he did something, and it was like she's obviously bothered by that. She's bothered by that too, and they even did it where Clark was clearly bothered by stuff, but she was really trying to keep focus where she didn't want to be with him because I guess she felt like Raven deserved it because they were together in the first place, but it all finally wrapped up, so we'll see something happen with Finn and Clark at some point, and I'm sure Clark and Raven will eventually be able to talk to each other, and it won't be super awkward, but it wrapped up in this episode, and we'll see how that carries on, but that was an interesting little moment at the end of the episode that it was an interesting moment. They just wrapped it up. They were like, we aren't going to carry this on forever, and they ended the triangle, and now it's just a straight line, I guess, but nice little point in the episode. And then of course there are other great points. One of the biggest is that of course Murphy came back in this episode, and in the trailer before this episode came on, they made it seem like him being with the Grounders was going to be the main point of the episode, and of course you knew it was going to be the virus that was going to be a big part of it, but it hardly seemed like he was really that important to the episode because in the beginning, of course, he was captured. It was like, oh, it's a big deal. I thought they were going to talk about how he survived. I also thought, based on the trailer, that he decided to work with the Grounders and that he wanted to get revenge on the 100, and that's why he did that, because they talk about how he said, how he told the Grounders everything, and then they just sort of pass over that because they're dealing with the virus. But it seemed like there was so much that could have just been talked about right there, especially since he wasn't really that sick for most of the episode. But it was just how they played it in the trailer, like that was going to be the main focus, and it was hardly the focus of the episode. There were, of course, bits and pieces in the episode. Of course, the beginning, some points in the middle, because he started to help out and he seemed like he was an okay guy. And then, of course, the end of the episode where he does actually kill the guy who tied the rope around his neck and he killed him off. So he wants his revenge, and he can, of course, blame it on the virus. He can say he didn't make it, it eventually got him, which I thought was crazy because I was like, of all the people, why is he still sick? Because he was one of the first people sick, and everybody else is out of there. It was, I think, Murphy, Raven, and then the other guy. And it's like all these people got sick and got better, and then he's still sick, and it was, of course, so he could get killed off in the end. But it'll be interesting to see what Murphy decides to do, and they'll probably give him a second chance. Who knows? Because they seemed like they got duped by him because he came back. He was like, "Look, I just want to help you guys out." Bellamy didn't want his help. He wanted him gone anyway, so he's still in a good mindset, but Clark saw him helping out. Of course, Octavia did as well because he was in there. Everyone saw him helping out. So if they put it to a vote and they don't just say, like, this is what's happening or this is not what's happening, odds are Murphy's going to get let back into the group, and then he's going to kill off the people that really pissed him off. And I guess he killed off one guy. The other two people would, of course, be Bellamy and Clark. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. That probably won't happen for a couple of episodes if they do decide to actually let him stay. But I don't know. I'm really curious as to how that's going to play out. And who knows who he might actually attack. He might attack other people he could attack. Octavia so that it affects Bellamy, and he might attack Finn so that it affects Clark or anybody else. But I'm definitely interested to see how things work out with him. And who knows, maybe he is actually working with the Grounders because they kicked him out. Maybe he just said he didn't know he had the virus and this or that, and they could have tortured him in the beginning because his nails were pulled off. It could have started that way, and then it could have transitioned into something else where he's like, look, I was cast out by these people because they just assumed I was a killer and they were going to string me up, and then they flipped the script when it ended up being the little girl, and he could have talked with the Grounders and then they came to sort of an agreement. So we don't really know, but we'll have to wait and see. And I know it'll be interesting because this show just, no matter how they do it, they find a good way to do it. So I'm excited to see how that plays out with his character and what his real plan is, how he expects to get like Bellamy and Clark while surrounded by the entire camp. He'd have to go out with them one on one, and it might happen with Clark where he might be in a small group with her. I doubt it would be one on one, but I don't really see him getting anywhere near Bellamy, considering Bellamy kind of sticks to how he feels. So he might have to go after Octavia to get Bellamy's attention. But that was yet another interesting point in this episode. And then something else that they did I really liked was focusing on the whole Jasper and Monty in this episode, where Jasper was getting all the attention from last week's episode when he killed the Grounders in the trees, and he got the bigger tent from Bellamy and stuff, and then he and Monty ended up having arguments. And I like their characters because they were introduced really early on in the episode, or in the series. They were in the first episode, and we got little bits and pieces here and there. Like Monty was the first person to really try contacting the Ark because he was good with technology and stuff, and then Jasper's really good with like herbs and stuff like that because his family grows crops, so he knows a lot about vegetables and things like that. So it was really cool to get a little background on them, and then in this episode we get an actual focus on them kind of going through the motions of, I guess, fame and stardom in a way, on a much smaller scale of course, but in the end they of course work it out and they just become friends again, and then they're both heroes because they blew up the bridge and stopped the Grounders from attacking. But it was a great episode. And then, before I forget, of course, there were two things that were mentioned very quickly in this episode that I cannot wait to see in the show. And I think it'll be, even though they were mentioned really quickly, one of them was actually mentioned twice in the episode, but they're going to be huge points in this series at some point. It might not even be this season because of the stuff they're dealing with as far as the Grounders that they know. But two new clans were mentioned in this episode, and one of which was a neutral clan, which will probably come into play at some point, but they won't really be an issue. And that was, I believe they're called like the Friends of the Woods, or Allies of the Woods, or Allies of the Forest, I believe Lincoln said. Excuse me. And they're more like a neutral clan, he mentioned, where they just happen to be in the territory near a lake, so they're like the people that will ferry you across if you're, I guess, good to them. Like, you good to us, we're good to you. And if you're good to them, you get passage across the lake and you can basically go wherever you need to go. So I'm curious to see them, because I feel like any going across any sort of lake and stuff like that, that opens up to whole new territories. It won't just be, oh, here's another side of the forest across the lake. It'll be a different type of territory. But like I said, that'll probably be season 2 or something like that. But the second clan that was mentioned is what I'm really interested in, and that is, of course, the Mountain Men, because, as Lincoln mentioned, they would kill all of them, so it makes me very curious as to who they are. And we got to see a picture of them in the beginning of this episode when Octavia was going through the book. And when they showed the face, or I guess the whole picture of it, it was just like a face, and the body kind of seemed like a shadowy figure. It was probably just behind trees. It was sort of quick when they showed it. So I was kind of just stuck on the mask, because it was just a plain white mask with the like eyes and stuff, but it looked really creepy. So it has me really curious as to who these Mountain Men are, and maybe they're, I believe it was the very first episode, when they find the bones that are deformed, maybe those are the Mountain Men, and they just happen to kill that one person, but they aren't exactly evolved like natural humans. They are the people who were affected by radiation, so their bodies are deformed, and maybe mentally they're handicapped because of all the radiation and that's carried on through generation after generation, or they're just crazy. They could just be serial killer psychopath people in the mountains and they just come down and murder everybody just because they're cannibals. Who know? I don't know, but I'm really curious about the Mountain Men, and they were the group that was mentioned twice because Lincoln mentioned it because they would kill everyone, and so of course Octavia passed that on to Bellamy. But I don't think we'll see them until maybe the middle of the season or the end of the season. I'm not really sure how many episodes we have, but I'm really excited to see them, and I'm definitely curious to see how things are going to play out between the 100 now that they've kind of banded together, and of course with Murphy on the inside now, whether or not he's doing his own thing or if he is working with the Grounders. And also, the one of the biggest things that happened in this episode was, of course, the a couple of the people, mostly the main characters, they went to the crash site on the Ark, or the crash site of the piece they broke off from the Ark, and all that happened was they found some dead bodies. They found the super explosive fuel that they used to blow up the bridge, but they didn't find anything that said, hey, this is Clark's mother, or this is the woman Diana, I believe her name was. So I'm really hoping that we get more from the Ark and we get just answers on what's going on there in the next episode, and hopefully it's revealed in the next episode that maybe the Grounders did get there first, and maybe they took Clark's mother and they took Diana, and maybe a couple other random people, because that's who they typically use as examples. It's like, hey, let's make a point, kill off nameless guy number 2. So they probably have them, and I'm really hoping they do, because I don't think it would be good to have it where Clark's mother as well as Diana is just killed off for no reason. Or, I mean, not no reason, but they crash on the ground and then their storylines just end. I feel like it would be such a waste of their characters. Especially Diana. Like, as much as I like Clark's mother, and she's obviously one of the good guys and she's one of the good adults, so it makes a different dynamic compared to all the good teenagers on Earth. But Diana being like the antagonist on the Ark, and then her being one of the few survivors on Earth, with the Ark being on lockdown, she could tell the kids anything she wanted to, and they would kind of have to believe it, because it's like, hey, she came from the Ark. Why would she lie to us? And she was the former chancellor too, and I'm sure a lot of the teenagers know that too. So if she is alive, hopefully, we get to find that out in the next episode. Somehow it's revealed, or maybe it's at least hinted at that the Grounders made it to the crash site first, and they took whoever was alive, and they're kind of keeping them for information. Like, you just came from space. What's going on up there, and this and that. So hopefully we get some answers on that. And of course, we will get to see more of the Grounders because the characters get kidnapped in the next episode, which was in the preview. So I'm excited for that. We get more interaction between the Grounders and the 100. And we'll really get to see how the dynamic continues, because they're going to have conversation. So I'm really excited to see how the more political side of this war is going to happen, because of course Clark's going to be the one to try to talk them down from killing everybody. So Clark and Bellamy together is like opposing sides, and they're opposing forces on the same side. So I'm curious to see how the talking part of this war is going to get handled in the next episode as well. But love this one. It was a nice episode. It had some great moments. We got some hints towards future storylines. We got Murphy surviving and possibly working with the Grounders, but definitely doing his own thing to get revenge. And just some other little side stuff between characters, Jasper and Monty. So it was a good episode for me personally. Of course, comment below and let me know what you guys saw this episode, favorite parts and your least favorite parts. And how do you guys think things are going to go on the Ark from now on, since we didn't get anything from the Ark in this episode, since things have been on lockdown? How do you guys think things are going on the Ark? And do you guys believe that Clark's mother, as well as Diana, were captured by the Grounders before the 100 got there? Comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.